Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we're really talking about the Muslim youth. And here again, this is one of those topics which would not be of interest to everybody, although really all of us should be very, very keen in making sure that we are focused on youth. In fact, the most important uh, work that we have in our community is really focusing on the Muslim youth because they are not only the present, they are the future as well. Um, So the first thing to understand about this is that any community, there are two ways it gets destroyed or ends. Any culture, and I've mentioned that before, there are only two ways they get destroyed. The first one is if some earthquake or hurricane or something come and wipe out all the people in that culture physically, or some pandemic. And the second way is if that community did not properly train and orient the next generation to continue those values and those ethics, if they did not prepare their young people, it's called the socialization process. So if that community does not take the time to make sure that the next generation clearly accepts, buys into, embraces the values and ethics of that community or that culture, then that next generation will slowly dilute it and eventually that culture will get lost. And so if you're talking about preserving your community, then it really is of utmost importance to be able to prepare your young people to become proper stewards and future leaders of that community that will embrace and all the values that they have. And so the importance of focusing on the youth comes from the fact that our very existence and continuity of our communities depends upon how we deal with the young people and how we prepare them for future leadership. And so this is in this context, it's really, really very important for all of us to recognize this. And one of the sadness for myself is that we as a community do not and are not really getting this very important concept because we are not really putting the kind of resources we need and the kind of attention we need to be able to do this. First of all, from the Quranic perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, have told all of us, "Qu anfusakum ahlikum nara," that you have to save yourself and your families from the fire, because families is what makes up communities. And then Allah talks about the children or the youth, and He says, let us ask from Allah, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلِ الْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Oh Allah, oh my Lord, gift to me, literally, good wives and good children that will become their righteous example and leaders of the people who have taqwa. And so, and that these children and these wives must be so good that they, when we look at them, our eyes become cool. They become the coolness of our eyes. And cool eyes is a very important thing in a desert. One of the most beautiful feelings you can have in a desert is to have cool eyes, because the sun always in your face, it's always very, very abrasive. And so when you have the ability to have your eyes, in a cool, nice way, it is probably a high characteristic. And so Allah says, ask for children who, when you look at them, your eyes become cool with the way they are and how beautiful they are. But Allah warns us, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ, that you have to be aware that your wealth and your children are going to be among the greatest tests that you will have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not going to be an easy job preparing our young people to be able to move to this level. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, defining who's a youth, uh, we're not talking about 60-year-old person saying, I feel young, I'm a youth. No. It's generally, we're looking at between the ages of 15 to 30, 35. These are the people that we're talking about, that we need to focus on making sure that they are the future leaders and being prepared. Now, as a community, what is it that we do or we are doing, or what is it that we have available to prepare our young people to become the best of the best, that will become true examples of the Islamic ethics and values. So let us look at some of the different facilities and avenues and opportunities that exist to prepare our young people. Of course, the first and foremost is the parents. They are the one who welcome this child into the world. They have the greatest influence in them in their first formative years. And so the parents' role becomes the most critical role in terms of raising proper children. And parents, unfortunately or fortunately, they always go in trying to deal with their kids with extremely high expectations. And there's nothing wrong in that. They want their children to be happy, to be healthy, to be educated, to be Islamic, to be moral, to be mannerly, to be respectful, to be hardworking, to be ambitious. Oh, we have so many wonderful wishes for our children to turn out to be like this. But the work to put in to make that happen, the effort we need to make, the sacrifices we need to make to produce such children, that's where parents sometimes don't step up to the plate to accomplish this very noble goal that they set out to have their children be. So parents have some challenges and restraints and constraints when they are trying to raise their children. So we are allowing our children first to be exposed to parents. So let us look at some of the difficulties and challenges parents have in terms of raising Islamically oriented leaders. So let's go to the other slide. So the parents' role, the constraints that parents have are many. You know, when you are a parent, there's a tremendous burden on you to do so many things. Parents first have to find and earn money. They have to pay the bills. They have to take care of their own children's health, provide a safe home, provide opportunities for the children. They have to cook and clean and wash and shop, get involved in the masjid, deal with family crisis, take care of their own health. You know, parents have a tremendously busy life because they're raising humans who have multiple complex needs. And so the life of a parent is not an easy thing. Then on top of that, to be able to raise children that will have this high caliber of Islamic behavior and personalities, it makes the role of the parent incredibly difficult. As among some of the challenges that the parents have as well is a lot of our parents are transition parents. That is, we are immigrants. We come from a different land and we're raising our children in America. And when you migrate, when you are an immigrant, you give up a lot. So a couple of the challenges as immigrant parents have, and hopefully we are going to transition to have parents, and we're having some of them who are born here, grew up here, and now are having children here in America, or probably become less. But in this stage, we're still having residual parents who grew up in a different country and trying to raise kids over here. And one of the problems you have is the social structure breaks down. And so when you're living in your home country, there's a whole structure that has been developed over hundreds of years of when you marry, what happens, you know, you go to your dad and you said, when you got the headache, what kind of medicine did you use? And you go buy the same medicine. When you move your kids to America, the same don't apply. So that whole thing breaks down. There's a technological gap also, in that technology has developed so fast that it has increased the distance between the children and the parent. And so it has created a problem for parents to be able to monitor, to manage their children, because the children are so much sophisticated with technology, especially now where kids are Zooming all day long and they have such smarts. I mean, I've been told that even like 6-year-old, they know how to play the games between the classes and how to hide and switch those screens and do all kinds of stuff that parents can't keep up. You know, so that makes a further difficulty because the parents can't solve the problems that the kids may have. And then you have parents who come from a different culture and with different norms and different psyche, and the kids have a completely different way in which they don't like the same foods, they don't like the same forms of entertainment as the parents. They are creating an American norm and culture, and that again creates a huge problem. And then most immigrants are running from some kind of unrest in society, poverty, political unrest, something anti-government. So a lot of immigrants, when they come here, they're not very civic minded. They don't feel the need to go out and mix with a larger community or to be passionate about issues of civics and getting involved in local politics. And whereas their children who grew up here want to get involved in civic issues, and so the parents sometimes prevent them from doing that, and you have another conflict developing. And also immigrants, they have a ghetto mindset. When you come to a larger culture, your first thing is to find people who look like you, who come from the same place, and you tend to just mix and mingle. You create a bubble with only your people and your group and your social setting, and you don't really move too much out of that. And so we go to work, but our whole social structure is based on the people who are like us, who similar minded like us, and we try to find them and we mix with them a lot, and that affects us from really properly interacting and interfacing with the wider culture. All these are problems that parents have to deal with, and still raise those kids to become amazing um, people who will take the baton to the next level. The other part of the parents, besides the parents' obstacles, there is also um, a lot of parents. They haven't been taught how to be parents. We didn't go to school. As I said before, we used to ask mom and dad what they did, and we did the same. But now, what mom and dad did in Pakistan or in Guyana or Trinidad may not apply in this environment. And so we can't use mom and dad, and so we have to figure out our own. And so parents, they're not well trained in terms of how do I raise my child in a setting in America to become a good conscious Muslim. And so that is a big challenge. Number two is that a lot of parents, they have very little understanding of Islam themselves. And so trying to raise Islamic children when you yourself don't know too much Islam is a huge challenge for parents. And then we don't have much support system in our communities to really help parents. I don't think any masjid is really, including my own, where we are putting great emphasis on parenting skills, teaching parents how to be better fathers and mothers. And that is really the need. We need to be able to help our parents to become better parents, or else they're going to be producing children and youth that we see coming out, as horrible human beings who are, so messed up that they're unable to cope even with general life. Parents also have other challenges as well. They're dealing with young people whose world is completely different from what the parents were accustomed to. The typical youth living in America on a very early age is exposed to cell phones, social media, technology, sports, movies, music, mixing of girl and boy, having beauty shaming and body shaming, and worrying about their beauty and their health and their weight and their, and trying to figure out how to fit in. Our young people have to deal with a lot of stress because the world has become complex. Their schoolwork and all the things that they're expected to learn keeps some of them getting with depression. Then the addictions of video games, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, the easy access of pornography, peer pressure, bullying in school, and the agenda of materialism in which you have to keep up, you have to have the latest name brand t-shirt or clothing and all of that. And then the easy availability of nightclubs and bars and going straight. So our young people, they're exposed to a world that is so difficult and pulls them in that direction, that to try to create or to help a youth to become a truly conscious Muslim, it's an incredibly difficult job. And so even though we have The parents as our first line of how we're going to prepare our community and our youth for the next generation. The parents face all of these challenges. And so the bottom line becomes very few parents are succeeding, and we're producing young people that is not of the level. I can tell you, I mean, I'm involved with you. If I grab any 10 young person and I ask them to recite Surah Fatiha, the chances of even one of them reciting it correctly is very minimal. And that's what we're in. If I ask them a simple question on Islam, I'm not sure that they'll be able to answer. And so we are not, we sometimes fool ourselves in thinking that we're doing a fantastic job because we are getting 10% and then 90% we don't seem to be bothered about. So that's one place where we can help our youth in terms of if we are able to help parents, then they can help their children produce a better quality of child as far as Islam is concerned. The second place that we go to is the weekend school, the madrasa. A lot of parents, they're not very learned in Islam, but they feel at least if we send our children to the weekend school, at least they will get some Islam. And the weekend school is limited in its scope. It's such an important role it plays, though, because it is a place where the child can get to learn to recite Quran, can get to learn basic Islam, can develop some Muslim friends. But as far as producing Muslim leaders, changing personalities, helping the child to become a conscious Muslim, the weekend school is very difficult for it to do. It's not that easy for it to do. The weekend school also have challenges of curriculum content, trying to find the right curriculum to be able to do in the school. The weekend school basically is like from 10 to 1 o'clock. You have about 2 to 3 hours once a week. It's very little time. There's always a problem of getting qualified teachers because it's a voluntary system. Some of the messages are paying teachers, but basically it's difficult to get teachers. The teaching methodology may not be unified. These people who we're calling teachers may not necessarily be trained teachers. They just know a little bit Islam above the average, and so they volunteer to teach at a madrasa. But they don't have the skills of how to teach well. And so the methodology of how we teach creates problems. The facilities may not be the best, and of course, the limited time. So the weekend school as a place for us to prepare our youth is part of the puzzle in terms of helping, but it's not the solution of how we're going to be able to do that. And we have to address all of these things if we're talking about really helping our young people. The third area that we go to is full-time Islamic schools. These are schools that are set up Monday to Friday, full-time, and it has the potential to really producing amazing children. But what has happened, the culture of the society is such that parents want their children to go to Islamic school, but they expect that their academics, which rightly so, must be there for the children to be able to at least academically compete. And so a lot of the schools default to just becoming a regular school with some Islamic input. And they face tremendous challenges of how do I make this school affordable to poor kids? Problem of funding, problem of curriculum relevancy. How do I create syllabi which would not produce academics but produce leaders as well? The Islamic school will produce academics, but they don't necessarily produce the leaders and the kind of go-getters that we're talking about that is required to take the Muslim community to the next level. The other place that we have set up for our young people to maybe get benefit is the masjid. But the masjid is not set up to really focus on young people. So that's another problem. Masjids are basically set up for communal prayer. That's the main emphasis of the masjid, to set up facilities for people to come pray, to do some social activities, to run some educational programs. The masjid is not focused on young people. And most masjids, they think for the youth, what we do, They think of the youth as an appendix. Let us put a basketball court over there, a soccer field over there, and we put some sports related things for the young people, and that should be enough. But the reality is that is not sufficient or efficient for us to do. And so part of what happens is that a lot of the masjids, they the politics and the dynamics in the masjid, the young people sometimes get turned off and they stop coming to the masjid. They don't see the masjid as a place where they can actually evolve and grow. They see it as a place where they go, somebody's going to criticize them, somebody's going to talk about the shirt they wear, the hat they have on, the tattoo that is on their arm. And so they begin to shy away from the masjid. And though the masjid can play a great role in molding and training them, at present, very few masajid have a dynamic, proactive program that can actually engage youth and bring them together and help and train them to become that special person. There's also set up in our society Islamic learning institutions, more and more coming on. You have Al-Maghrib and you have some universities, Zaytuna Institute, and you have these places where you can go and get a 4-year college degree. But most of those degrees also, they are very specific. They're not trained, they're producing academics and not necessarily leaders. So a lot of those people who come out from these institutions, they don't necessarily get involved in community work. They either continue teaching at another institution or they become very limited in terms of how they operate. They do a few seminars and they limit themselves. They don't get involved in community work, grassroots level, dawah, and all of that. Very few people who come out from these institutions actually do so. So that also has some constraints. They are not a driving force to prepare the youth for the next generation. And then you have also available to the young people to help young people get trained is the youth groups. And I think this is the best possible vehicle where young people can really take their place. And so we've got to be able to create dynamic youth groups. There are a few available, but they also face challenges. A lot of the young people, sometimes they're turned off by the old people. And so they think that they could run the youth group by themselves. And so they reject the elders coming and telling them. They think the elders are irrelevant, not have anything that can benefit them, does not understand their world. And so some of the youth groups, they want to run themselves. And this is where the difficulty happens, because they deprive themselves of the experience of the older generation who have so much to share for them. And so some among their challenges is to really get good trainers to train them, creating relevant programs. A lot of sometimes the youth group, they're just regurgitating some program that, they were accustomed to, or their fathers and mothers that used to run in their back home country, not programs that are suited for this society. And then they lack funding because most of the masajid is not giving money for youth, and they have to find their own funding. And then we don't have life coaches. A lot of young people have a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of somebody they need to talk to. Also to ask in terms of career guidance, in terms of depression, in terms of things that they're going through. As I mentioned, their whole world, how much things they have facing them. And we have not focused on creating within the Muslim community life coaches who could become mentors for them and to be available to help them and guide them in a particular direction. So this is what we have available for young people. And I'm telling you, all of this in totality do not fully and effectively create and produce the kind of leaders and young people that we need. I have been very fortunate in my life to have been one of, as a young person, when I got involved, and I was able to be placed in the hands of proper leaders and proper trainers who I looked with my own eyes produced from his work. and how he was able to recruit and marshal a network and has produced thousands of young people now, I being one of them. So I know and I see the power of when you have proper people doing this job and preparing the next generation, how effective and amazing it can be. One person can make a big, big difference. And we have got to really, as communities, figure out. Everyone in America doing youth work is all experimenting. But we have got to figure out and come together and figure out how we're going to produce righteous, conscious believers who will be prepared and willing to take on the mantle of leadership in our society. So I want to say to those of you who are interested and trying to be part of this process and want to organize youth, there's some advices that we have to make about this. Because a lot of people want to get involved in the youth, but they don't really even know how to go about doing it. There are three kinds of competency that we need to have: dawah competency, or operational competence, and administrative competence. And I'll try not to spend too long on this, but it's really each of these has to be given its due. So if you're a person and you said, I want to get involved in helping youth, you have to know going in that these are the three things that we will have to make sure we do real well if we want to produce the kind of young people that we're talking about. And so, dawah competence. Let's look at that first one. So this involves four main things: connecting, motivating, education and training, and empowering. So this first step is to understand, how do you gather and connect youth? How do you bring them to the table? What is it that we need to do to interface with them and convince them enough to come and be part of the process of becoming a future leader of Islam? And so we've got to begin by creating special programs that youth like, sports activities and events that will interest the youth and wanting to come and attend, so that we could begin a relationship with them, we can begin a connection with them. And then secondly, to move to the next second phase is be able to motivate them by letting them know that over here we have solutions to some of the things that you've been looking for. Your identity issues, your mentoring, your friendship, your clearing up your misconceptions. So we've got to create other kinds of program that will motivate the young people to want to come. They feel excited and it's meeting the things that they've been looking for. We're providing solutions to those. And then once you get them motivated, then we go to training and educating. So we create classes and circles where we're now teaching them and helping them to grow. And these classes in circle, they must have a multifaceted focus. We're not only teaching memorization of Quran, we have to teach them about etiquette, we have to teach them about character, we have to teach them about how to have proper skill sets that are available and needed. When we do this, there are many mistakes that we make, and some of those mistakes we need to avoid in the way we dispel and we pass on in training and education. Sometimes we just go rote memorization without understanding. This will only, it's not an effective way to just have kids just memorize without any understanding. And the more they understand, the easier they will memorize. Teaching the seerah has a specific way, not just as a story, a chronological story, but we have to be able to teach them the lessons from seerah. So that has to be presented in a particular way. Islam, presenting Islam as a practical faith, not as a theoretical construct. Teachers have to have a good example to the young people, because the young people watch their teachers. If a teacher is late and display poor examples, of course it will affect on the teachers. Rituals, Islam should not be presented as just a bunch of rituals of do's and don'ts. They've got to be able to see its beauty and how it is operationalized in their life. So a lot has to be attention has to be paid in terms of the education part of it. The sessions must be interactive. You must have spiritual dimensions to them. So the kids begin to understand the concept of Allah and what is taqwa and why do Allah sees me and why I need to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Emphasis on manners, characters, text, lifestyle. And so this is a long laundry list of so many things that we have to be focused on when teaching the young people, and we'll be making these mistakes a lot of times. Empowering, once you begin to teach them, you've connected, you're motivating them, they're coming to the class, they're learning, we've got to provide opportunities, for them to be able to be involved and to solve projects, to lead projects, to champion them, and giving them a global focus, not just focus on the Muslim community. We've got to help our young people to think beyond Muslim, beyond the Muslim boundaries of I'm just helping Muslim and having a little Qiyamul Layl here and a little seminar here. They've got to be able to think on the global level of how do we tackle and solve the problems of the globe, climate change and all the other stuff, that our young people will think big in terms of the kind of things they want to do. And we have to put a whole bunch of resources to support them as they endeavor to become champions of these various projects. So that's the dawah component that must be done for those who want to organize young people. This is the first thing that we need to understand about. In relation to the operational competence, this is where a lot of things break down. When you have groups or you have masjids or you have communities that things are not spelled out very clearly, and the professionalism of how to operate, we must have methodology, proper standards. The aqidah must be clearly defined. You must have a regular review or muhasabah of your processes and programs. Understand the expectations of people and make sure you exceed them. Clear about mission and vision. Respect for time. Create a kind of atmosphere of brotherhood and forgiveness and nurturing that togetherness with each other. The concept of forgiveness, infusing in the students and the young people this idea of focusing on quality and functioning in such a way that there's no bureaucracy and hiccups and that is very rigid. We have to make it very fluid, because with young people, things are happening quick and fast. And we must encourage creativity, doing things only for Allah, teaching them to fulfill our obligations, and promote specialization, that they become specialized in different areas. And of course, embracing the best available technology. So when we are dealing with the young people, all of these are going to be part of what we have to establish among them. In terms of administrative competence, this is also a very important area. It's not enough to know the whole Quran and then you can't do anything in administration. You don't have administrative competence, then everything is going. So we have to become skilled at how we run meetings, project planning, program planning, how you properly file legal, being aware of the legal ramifications of what we do, use of technology again, communication, human relations, tactical and strategic planning, management, the time and finance management, networking and security and marketing. And I'm not just putting these things together to say, there's a whole bunch of very highfalutin stuff. No, I myself have been intimately involved in whenever we are doing youth stuff, to make sure that the youth begin to get knowledge and understand that this is the way you function, that when they put out a program or put out a project, that it is done in a real professional, excellent manner. And so those who want to organize young people can't come to the table thinking that I can just do things slipshod. They've got to be able to understand that I am trying to prepare the next generation to take over the community. This is a very, very, very important job. And we have got to bring 100% commitment towards it. And what are we trying to produce from among the youth? The reality is what the success looks like in the young people. So there are 4 essential characteristics that we want to develop in the youth. All of this training and education must produce a young person who, number one, is understand his connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His spirituality is of such that he understands his relationship with Allah. He makes sure that he's obeying Allah, worshiping Allah, calling upon Allah, that he has this deep connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that drives whatever he is doing only for Allah. So that's the first quality or characteristic we want to create from the youth. The second is tarbiyah, which is an Arabic word which means training and education. And that is developing his knowledge, his skill set, his character, his personality, her character, her skill set, to recite Quran well, for example, to understand the religion properly, to be able to personal growth, and who is able to motivate themselves to continue to grow. The third is activism. We're not preparing young people to just be on their own. This is a young person who is committed to the da'wah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to calling people to Allah, to the Islamic work, the Islamic effort, the community building, that you're trying to produce a young person who becomes active in the community and is out there trying to help to make the world a better place. The fourth area is the relationships, that you want to produce a young person who is able to relate with everyone in a very beautiful way, to get along with others, to know how to be a team player, to understand how to be pleasant and how to be able to diplomatically negotiate and communicate and relate with others. So these were the four things. When we had the group called FAME, this was the goal that we had set out for to produce. And if you notice the letters STAR, they stands for star. So you're producing a star. And we also should notice in these four, they cover every single relationship that you will have in your life. Your relationship with Allah, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with the Islamic da'wah and work, and your relationship with others. So in these four, we are actually covering all the possible relationships we'll have in our lives. So when you produce a young person who have these four qualities, in which they're very close to Allah, they are always elevating themselves, they are very active in helping and being kind and generous and merciful and helping the world, and then they can relate to families, to friends, to non-Muslims, to Muslims, even relationship with animals and the planet, that they have mastered this skill set. And so the training and development that we do with the young people must produce this in them. And so we have schematics in terms of how to measure their spirituality. So you'll have checklists. They must pray the 5 daily salah. You must make the zikr after. And so you can check practically, statistically, how my development is going in whatever area. For the tarbiyah, we define exactly what kind of books you need to study, what kind of topics you need to master. And so the young person gets a blueprint of the kind of direction and place that they need to be going and what they need to focus on. And so for those of you who are serious about Islamic work, this is really what we are trying to do. I want you to also mention before I close that the work of young people is not a quick fix solution. A lot of people think they'll just get up some youth and they start some work. It's a long, careful process. It takes a tremendous amount of commitment. And you need to be very patient. When you're dealing with young people, craziness will be the norm. They're always going to get into trouble. When I was a young man in our group, sometimes you'll have somebody hit somebody down on the road, another one do some crazy thing, another one decide to correct an imam. And so we're always constantly dealing with the exuberance of youthfulness, because the youth always think they know better than everyone. And so all of that you have to deal with, some of the things that they will get into. But it is really very important that the masjids and the organizations begin to find ways of working together. We cannot do this job as one masjid trying to do something. It has to be the collective effort of every one of us, of across masjids, to create these opportunities for young people. And lastly, I want to say that we've got to help the parents. There must be parenting seminars that will help our parents to understand how to raise young people in this society. We've also got to help our young people to get good spouses, because the first commitment to the young people is to make sure that mom and dad are Islamic, and that understand Islam. So finding spouses are really important, because when you have two good spouses married, two good young person married, they will create a nice home of Islam. And so we've got to tackle this problem from several ends. What we end up having is we end up getting the young people after they're messed up, after they have come through homes that didn't do much for them. And so now they come to the Imam or the masjid and say, hey, help us. And so what we find is this young man, in really bad shape. We've got to stem the problem from the top side as well, upstream, taking care of the parents, to help the parents to produce better kids, so we have less of them coming down to us, and to help people to find good spouses so that they could create those homes. So it's a problem that is huge and vast. But if we are to really create and grow beautiful Muslim communities in America, we've got to deal with it head on. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to address it. Every place you go, people are trying to address it, but we've not been able to my mind, do full justice to it yet. As I said, I can go in any masjid, any community, and I grab 10 young people. They are totally unprepared. And there are people from the masjid. Imagine if you grab 10 who don't come to masjid. It's even worse. They are on a different planet. So may Allah help us to get there. And I hope that, all of you will get involved in some way or the other to help our young people navigate all of these and find a way to come out successful, inshallah. We all need to work together on this. Assalamu alaikum.